So if you have ever touched a database, you know things can get messy and fast. Today, we are going to talk about a concept that's absolutely fundamental to bringing order to all that chaos, the MySQL primary key. Honestly, it's probably the most important tool you have for making sure your data is reliable, searchable, and just makes sense. Let's dive in. Okay, let's start with a scenario you've probably thought about. Picture this. You're running an online store. You've got thousands, maybe tens of thousands of customers, and you get a call, you need to look up an order for a Jane Doe. Simple, right? But what if you have 2 Jane Does, or 10, or 50? How in the world do you know you're pulling up the right person's info?
And this right here is what that chaos actually looks like inside a database table. You can see we've got 2 different Jane Doe entries. But look, one is a refund request and the other is a brand new order. If you only search by name, there's no reliable way to tell them apart. I mean, that's a recipe for some really costly mistakes.
So, how do we fix this data identity crisis? Well, the solution is actually beautiful in its simplicity, but it's incredibly powerful. It's time to introduce the star of the show today, the primary key.
You know, the easiest way to think of a primary key is to imagine it's like a unique social security number for every single row in your data. Its entire job, its only job, is to guarantee that this row, and only this row, has this specific ID. It really doesn't matter if every other piece of data in the row is identical to another one. The primary key will always be one of a kind.
And boom! Just look at the difference this makes. By simply adding a customer ID column and telling the database, hey, this is our primary key, the problem completely vanishes. The Jane Doe with ID 101 is now perfectly unambiguously distinct from the Jane Doe with ID 103. Just like that, the ambiguity is gone. We've created order from chaos.
Now, for a column to actually work as a primary key, it has to follow 2 rules. They're super simple, but they are absolutely non-negotiable. Let's take a look at what they are.
First up, and this is the big one, every single value in the primary key column has to be unique. You simply can't have 2 customers with the ID 101. The database itself won't even let you do it. It'll throw an error. This is the core principle that just stops duplicate records in their tracks.
And the second crucial rule is that a primary key can never, ever be empty. In database speak, this means it can't be null, which is just a fancy way of saying there's no value there. Every single row must have a value for its primary key. A record without an ID just can't exist. It's kind of like having a person in your system without a fingerprint. So when you put these rules together, what you get is an unbreakable guarantee. Every record will always have a unique, non-empty identifier, and each table gets one and only one primary key to act as its ultimate source of truth for every single row. Okay, so that's the theory, right? And it's pretty straightforward. But how does this actually look when you're writing code? Let's see how you actually tell MySQL, hey, make this column my primary key.
You basically have 2 main chances to do this. Ideally, you want to set it up right from the get-go, when you're first creating your table. But hey, don't worry. If you forget or if you're inheriting an old table, you can always add a primary key after the fact. So here's the most common way you'll do it. When you write your create table statement, you can define the primary key right then and there. See here, we're creating a users table, and we're just telling MySQL flat out that the user ID column is the primary key. It's really that simple. But what if you're working with a table that already exists and doesn't have a primary key? Well, the alter table statement is going to be your best friend. This command lets you go into an existing table and add that primary key constraint to a column, bringing that all-important order to your data. All right, before we wrap up, let's clear up one thing that trips a lot of people up. You'll hear these 2 terms thrown around, primary key and unique key. They sound almost the same, but they have some really important differences. So what's the deal? Here's the breakdown. A table can have only one primary key. Think of it as the official ID card for that record. But you can have multiple unique keys on that same table. So for example, your customer ID would be the primary key, but you'd probably also make the email column a unique key because you don't want 2 users with the same email, right? And here's the critical difference. A unique key can actually allow 1 null value, whereas the primary key, never, ever. So we've covered what a primary key is, the rules it follows, and how to create one, but let's just zoom out for a second. Why does this one little concept matter so much in the grand scheme of things? The primary key is truly the backbone of any good database. It guarantees the integrity of your data, so you can actually trust it. It automatically stops those messy duplicates from ever happening.
But maybe most importantly, it's the linchpin that lets you build relationships between different tables. It's how you connect a specific customer to all of their orders. Relational databases literally wouldn't work without it. And on top of all that, it makes finding your data way, way faster.
At the end of the day, it all comes down to this. A primary key isn't just some technical detail. It is the absolute foundation of data trust. It's the core thing that ensures the information you're building your app, your business, or your research on is accurate, consistent, and totally reliable.
And that's the real power, isn't it? Once you've got that solid, trustworthy foundation in place, the possibilities of what you can build on top of it are pretty much limitless. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next Explainer.